Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we do have 4.
Got ourselves a quorum.
Yes,
I had not heard that anybody else was.
me either, but 4 is enough for a quorum.
Yes.
So, okay, it's 5:59, but
The 6 o'clock start time about threw me off.
yeah,
Yeah,
I checked it like 3 times.
I
like,
did too. I sure
Yeah.
did too. I checked it in the parking lot when I was.
Yeah.
that's the
even-
worst feeling too.
I know, because yeah,
Am I here early? Or am I going to be late?
Mm-hmm.
because I have arrived on the wrong night before, so I'm sure you've gotten a text when I did it.
Where's everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, it's 6. Okay. All right, it is 6 p.m. So we will call this special meeting to order for USD 348. Would invite you to rise to say the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, and may I have an approval of the agenda, please?
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
Susan has moved and Chris has seconded. All those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. And I will just point out that on a board of 7, 4 being present is enough to have a quorum. So we are totally within the rules to go ahead and conduct our business. With that, we'll move on at this time to public comment. Before we do that, I'll just quickly read the public participation guidelines. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Public comment agenda item is the time for any student, patron, or staff member to have an opportunity to share topics of interest or just to make a comment to the board. This is the only time during your meeting that a person can discuss an item with the board and share their opinion. Generally, the board does not respond to topics shared at this time, inasmuch as no background had been previously obtained and is not advisable to address situations without all the facts. The board can really only speak when they vote. If a board member responds, it is only that board member's opinion, not the board as a whole. Audience comments may be relative to any agenda item, whether or not they placed it on the agenda, or it may be any topic of their choice. This is not a time to discuss specific personnel or specific student matters. Audience comments are limited to a maximum of 5 minutes. Also, if a delegation of persons comes to discuss a single issue, every attempt should be made to avoid redundancy and have each person state only new facts or new perceptions during their allotted audience time. And so with that, whoever would like to come forward and speak, all that we ask is that you just say your name, so that way Megan, our board clerk, can record that for the record, and then she will give the time so that you know your time limit. And I'd also, from feedback from the last meeting, if you could make sure and speak into this mic, which I know that's not everybody's comfort level, that way the people watching at home can hear too. I got a few comments from the last meeting that it was hard to hear the public comment, and so that way everyone can listen. So with that, and we can just take turns and we'll listen respectfully, and thank you so much for coming tonight. Shelley?
Good morning, school board. I'm here to thank you for voting last week for a return to fully in-person instruction with a mask optional policy. Thank you for supporting choice for families and teachers. Not only is this district offering a mask optional in-person instruction, but parents and students can also choose a remote option for education. So we have more opportunities for choice. And choice is so important. Choice is freedom, the thing that makes America great. I hear the phrase follow the science. Well, to be quite honest, there isn't just one science out there. There are actually two. One that supports masks and vaccines, and one that rejects the mask and believes in natural immunity and early treatment of COVID symptoms. I don't think as a community or country that we will ever all agree on which science to follow, but my hope is that as Americans we can agree that parents and teachers are entitled to make choices for what is best for their health and the health of their families. So I just thank you, USD 348 School Board, for supporting the community right of choice. Thank you so much for serving our community.
Thank you. Who would like to go next?
Question is whether this will go short enough for me. My name is Jessica McQuarrie. I come here today to ensure that you hear from the other side, the parents who strongly favor continued COVID protections. And I ask that the board reconsider their vote from last week to make masks mandatory in schools this year. I have two little girls, a third grader and a kindergartner. The past 16 months have been brutal on all of us. I want my girls to have the in-person experience and to be able to engage with their peers. We have to do this safely. Unless something is formally mandated, it allows people to take extreme liberties, instead choosing to exercise their freedom over science. It is reckless and premature to eliminate masks in schools, especially when many children are not eligible for the COVID vaccine. Furthermore, the prevention strategies work best when combined with masking. What happens in the schools right now affects the community, and an outbreak in the schools means an outbreak in our community. Our children and our community deserve more than that. These children have sacrificed far too much for far too long to throw caution to the wind now. Few will argue that our children and everyone have strongly felt the impact of this pandemic. There has been a significant increase in substance abuse, reports of depression, higher demand for mental health services, and weeks-long waits to see a mental health professional. My own child's emotions became quite distressing earlier this year. We can agree that most children perform better in person, but we must be safe and we must follow the science. I think we all want to return to normal, but the virus has other plans and we aren't in control yet. Cases are rising all around us. Eudora, as an example, went from a 9.1 test positivity last Wednesday to 11% on Friday. Furthermore, the ages 10 to 17 represent the second highest positivity rate among county residents. If that doesn't show we need to keep COVID protection in schools, I don't know what does. I worry that people are overlooking several facts and considering what to do for the coming school year. Our low infection rates last year occurred while we had multiple protections in place. We combined universal masking, mandatory social distancing, frequent hand washing, and increased sanitation in our schools. Furthermore, a significant portion of the district did online learning, which reduced classroom density. Last year's virtual students also suffered, sacrificing in-person learning and social interaction in exchange for their physical safety. We are facing a stronger, more contagious, and potentially more deadly variant right now. We've simply sacrificed too much to give up now. School is supposed to be a safe and healthy space for our children. It is our duty to continue a layered approach to COVID protections until everyone can be vaccinated and given that choice. Kansas City and Lawrence school districts have chosen to follow medical and scientific recommendations from the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the World Health Organization. They will require masks for unvaccinated people during the upcoming school year. Why would we be any different? I've heard people say that a child's risk for COVID is around 0.01%. I asked how these people define risk. If their risk is risk of death, then their argument may hold true. But my definition of risk includes quality of life. I worry about long-term complications like cardiovascular inflammation, infertility, damage to the lungs and kidneys, loss of cognitive function, and more.
and I personally refuse to
doom my children to a life of health issues over 1 year and the discomfort of a mask. The science doesn't lie. The CDC, AAP, and WHO all recommend combining strategies to protect our children and the unvaccinated population. Again, I urge you to go beyond guidance or recommendations and ask you to implement a district mandate to continue mandatory masking and all COVID protections in schools, particularly in groups who cannot be vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to speak next? Yes, we have one over here, and one over here. Yeah.
My name is Jill Morgan. I'm a parent of 3 current students, in 4th, 5th, and 7th grade. I'm also the parent of 2 graduates of Baldwin Public Schools, and I'm a registered nurse with 15 years of experience. I hope you all received my email, and I thank the board members that responded. I'm here tonight to ask you to reconsider the mask optional plan, especially for students under the age of 12. These students are not yet eligible for the vaccine and are therefore vulnerable to COVID, especially with the Delta variant being more transmissible than the original strain, meaning it's more contagious. Many of the young students have not had the opportunity yet to choose vaccination. Preventing the spread of COVID requires layers of protection. You've probably heard of the Swiss cheese method or model. No single layer is 100%, so we need multiple layers of protection. Ideally, vaccination would be first, but children under 12 can't receive the vaccine. Like my 4th and 5th graders, they're not yet eligible, which makes masking even more important. Universal masking with necessary exemptions for students with disabilities or medical exemption, offers the best protection for the wearer, for kids who can't wear masks, and for schools and communities. Social distancing and hygiene, ventilation, and surface cleaning are also important, but vaccination and masking are key measures of protection. Universal masking will also reduce the bullying and harassment that my own kids have faced this summer during academy. My 3 kids have been attending masked, but on the bus and in the classroom, all 3 have been harassed and bullied because they're still wearing a mask to protect themselves, but more importantly, to protect others. And I'm very concerned about the upcoming school year if masks are optional. My kids and all kids deserve an in-person learning that's safe and healthy and free from bullying and physical harm. My expectation is that schools are teaching our children to critically evaluate evidence and data, to believe in science, and to value expert opinion. Expert guidance from the CDC and the AAP, as already mentioned, recommend masking, especially for the unvaccinated. However, the school board has to ignore scientific evidence and data, as well as expert guidance and the opinion of medical professionals and scientists, and instead to listen to those who are the loudest and most persistent. This sets a terrible example for our students and does not demonstrate a commitment to their health, safety, or well-being. Please do not put our youngest kids and our futures at unnecessary risk and require universal masking, at the very least for those under 12, for whom vaccination is not an option. And really, we need to be consistent with what was done at the end of the year last year, and offer in-person learning with universal masking to protect our students and our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Marie Taylor. Last week, the board voted to start the 2021-2022 school year like we started school in 2019. Thank you. Thank you for supporting Parents' Choice. For all of you who are here speaking against the board saying we should have a mask mandate, while they did not vote this way last week to avoid a lawsuit, Lawrence schools are facing pending lawsuits. Did you know that a mask mandate violates Section 1 of the Kansas Constitution Bill of Rights, which affords protection to the rights of personal autonomy, which includes the ability to control one's own body, to assert bodily integrity, and to exercise self-determination? Look it up if you don't believe me. Some people claim to be following the science. Well, I believe we're all well past the scientific issue here and debating which science is right. I did want to let the mask mandate people here, people that are favoring mask mandates, know that there are scientific evidence in the other direction. I thought about printing out and providing all 50 studies confirming the ineffectiveness of masks for COVID-19 and 40 more confirming their negative health effects. But again, I was going to print out each study for each board member, but I remembered that I too like trees. And so I thought following up with an email and a link to those studies would be more environmentally friendly and more economical way of getting this information in front of the board. But I will leave that here. I'm not here tonight to rehash the mask mandate anyways. We're here for the COVID-19 protocols. So I looked over the mitigation strategies and I have some comments, public comments. That's why we're here. I have concerns about the 10-day quarantine policy when a person is not exhibiting any symptoms. So why are we asking students that are not sick to stay home in this school? Now, let me say, if a child is sick, they should stay home, absolutely, unquestionably. But a child who is not sick should not be subjected to missing school, schoolwork, important lessons. Our children are already drastically behind and are failing to meet grade standards. This is not new information to the board. Unnecessary extended quarantines will simply make it impossible to catch up. Again, if you're sick, stay home. But if you're well, be in school. I specifically struggle with page 2 and 3 where it says defining cases. So what does a suspected case mean? Does anyone have sniffles? Or what about allergies? Who decides to send in a kid for a COVID-19 test? Should the parents decide? It says that if you're a suspected case, you have to quarantine for 10 days until you get a test back. So here's the problem with that. The tests are all PCR tests. And as you're aware, the new findings show that these PCR tests have failed their full review. The FDA has announced that the PCR test for COVID-19 has revoked its emergency use authorization. There are just too many false positives. So why are we having our kids take these tests again? My last question is in regards to page 3 of the mitigation, the COVID-19 prevention measures for 2021-2022 school year. It says that fully vaccinated individuals are exempt from quarantine. So who's checking to see if the student or staff member is vaccinated? Will that be on record somewhere? That concerns me. So how about if you're feeling ill, you stay home? Why are we depending on faulty, unreliable tests to tell us if we're sick? The designer of the PCR test had stated several times that the PCR cannot tell if somebody's sick. So don't sentence our kids to a year of consistent, unnecessary quarantine when they're not sick. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to speak?
My name is Mike Kennedy. We have 2 children in school here, and I want to thank the board last week for their courageous vote for our parents' choice and the students' choice in wearing their masks. So let me know if I go over time. I'll give your boy this time. I don't want to dismiss people who care for their kids. We all care for our kids. But, you know, I put together some words around the AP and CDC guidelines. I mean, guidelines from physicians and the CDC are issued of any illnesses and diseases as their sole goal to prevent that disease. They often take in other factors that are important to the health of an individual, other only that disease, right? So the CDC knows that obesity causes heart disease, high blood pressure, asthma, type 2 diabetes, you name it, including mental disorders such as anxiety and depression. 1 in 5 children are obese. Our schools still offer lunch items, such as brownies, cookies, and pizza, and do not mandate children behaviors when they eat food in our schools. So why do we need to mandate masks? The same thing with Lyme disease. We recommend physical exercise every 1 hour per child every day, that our schools treat PE as elective, not mandatory, but the class meeting is only 45 minutes. So again, not according to CDC recommendations. They also suggest that we limit media screen time for children of all ages. But I guess a lot of us don't do an effective job at passing on time. The key here is that regarding masks, we don't make considerations that just the mask is the only thing to keep our children safe. Perhaps some of the mental distress that children are having is because of the burden of the mask, personal comfort, irritation to the skin, develop asthma, lower self-esteem, the impact of social interactions, and our ability, our children's ability to develop social skill sets, or simply the exercise of freedom as they see fit. Regarding the social aspects, there's been studies and published studies in psychology publications that say covering masks in children lowers accuracy and confidence of their assessment of displayed emotions and their ability to read emotions. This can itself cause confusion and inability to interpret emotions, causing depression. We are in an age where our children already suffer from negative impacts of testing and other forms of social disconnect with forming relationships. And masking is just one additional step that's going to further confuse our children. These things need to be considered over in addition to the risk itself of COVID. We're not going to be able to prevent COVID at all costs. We can't prevent COVID at all costs. I can get into the effectiveness of masks, and even under the most controlled scientific studies where they're fully donned, completely closed up. These cloth masks are 50% effective in schools. I think, as I said last week, the effectiveness of the mask should not be seen as something that prevents COVID. And as the sole purpose of our being is going to school, we need to consider the other aspects of our children's health, their mental health, their ability to form relationships. Because when I think someday, and I may be in my own years, when I rely upon the younger generation, either to hospitals or care, or go down the side of the road, needing help, or hiring a contractor, or calling 911 for a threatening emergency, or fighting for an enemy to protect my homeland. I'm going to need that younger generation to be empathetic, passionate, communicative, receptive, and brave. And most importantly, able to think critically and decide what are the real risks and what are risks that yes, we need to take into account. We don't have to have absolute protection, even when that protection is not 100% effective to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
I'm Virginia Merritt, and I'm the mother of going into fourth grader and 3-year-old twins who will be at preschool this year. And we did remote schooling last year for my bedtime third grader. And we're looking forward to having him back in school this year. We were very pleased with how mitigation strategies were done last year, and we really struggled not having that social interaction and being in person. And so, although I don't have a formal reply, but I just wanted to make sure my voice was heard and that there are other parties in town and that are we're really pleased with the work you had done last year for mitigation strategies. I am aware that the masking is not a foolproof 100% layer in this protection for our kids. Those of us who have kids under 12 who do choose to follow the science and direction that chooses to go the vaccine route are not offered that ability right now. And so we don't have that layer of protection. The masking layer, we don't have 100%, even if we choose to send our kids to school. As the science states, to my mask protects you, your mask protects me situation. So that is a concern that I have. My son was also in the summer academy this year, and I was disappointed in the communication that took place. Again, I had confidence in what had been done last year, and didn't realize that in the middle of the academy, we were gonna have mask mandate switched into where he no longer, he was now one of the few students in class wearing a mask, and also was bullied. And I am concerned about the effects of that. I know I heard last week that there are concerns about labeling students and teachers with vaccines, not releasing that information and not wanting to have the masks be what labels kids who are vaccinated and who are not. I understand that completely. I also have a fear for my own child going into the school year, that we're having the label very clearly on his face that he is choosing to wear a mask, and we as a family are choosing to have him wear a mask. So that is a concern of mine as well, that is not necessarily being addressed. Also, in the preschool setting, when last year everyone was wearing masks, and so it would be easy for a young student to know they would all keep their masks on. Now, if I have my students going and the majority of the class, then what are the chances they're going to be keeping their masks on? So, just wanted to let you know that, and I will be making a formal response to you as well via email. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Denise. Is that better? Less echo. My name is Denise Burnwell, and I'm a parent of 3 kids in our school district, a 3rd grader, 4th grader, and an 8th grader. And I too wanted to say thank you for your efforts last week in sending our children back to school this 2019 year. I want to tell you how much relief that brought all 3 of my children, that they can be quote normal again. It brought me relief that I don't have to fight my children every single day on where's your mask, wear it right. Oftentimes that mask came home completely soaking wet and nasty and gross, covered in grime, and I don't know what it was, and it was really bad. But I do also want to say to the parents who have had kids that have been bullied for wearing masks, that is completely shameful, and I'm sad to hear it. I'm sad to hear what's happening in our schools. It seems like bullying in our schools tends to be an issue at every age and for all kinds of reasons. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed, but not necessarily a reason why we decide to mandate masks for every student. Let's address the bullying and not make that a reason for the requirement. I do want to note that I think that the decisions need to be data driven, and I appreciate that the school board seems to have been working hard this last year for that, to make sure that the decisions made for Baldwin City are based on current numbers and what's happening in this area, and not necessarily what's happening in Kansas City or New York or LA or even next door Missouri. I think it's important to look at what's happening here and doing what's best for our students, keeping in mind that education is important. We all know that, we all agree. And kids are fast and more comfortable. The drop in numbers last year are evident that there were problems. According to the mitigation report that came out, I did also have some concerns on the lack of benchmarks for mitigation changes. It did note that the mitigation rules could change at any given moment, but it doesn't mention why. What are those benchmarks? What are we going to look for to change those benchmarks? So I'd really like to see additions to that as to what you're looking for when we're going to make changes, so on and so forth. And I'd also like to address that SPED teams are being asked to determine PPE needs for students. Our special education teachers being trained in healthcare and protective equipment and each student's needs and why each student might need a particular kind of PPE. I really think that may be asking, that's putting a great burden on some of our special education teachers. and giving them responsibility that they may or may not be comfortable with. And really, they are not qualified to address. That's something that a healthcare worker should be addressing, not special education teachers. But I do want to give the floor to others. Thank you so much for your service and work for our city. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak?
Hello, I'm Carrie Palmer, and I want to say thank you so much also for offering a choice for math and for our kids to be able to return to school normally for this upcoming school year. I have 2 high school daughters, and my youngest will be a junior, and for her only have 50% of her high school with normal school is really scary. And my other daughter is a senior, she's going to be graduating. And I have a lot of worries that they're not up to par where they should be because of the lack of education this last year. And so my reason for talking tonight is really around the quarantine and the COVID policies that the 8 pages I read through what it stated. We know there's a lot more help out there for kids and folks to get help and support when they need for symptoms for COVID and things of that nature. And we know that transmissions last school year were low. We know transmissions right now in our area are low. I think all of Douglas County, if you do the math, all the people, it's like 0.01% of the folks are going to have COVID. So as it stands now, we're in a really good place. But right now, the quarantine policy states the 10 days, 72 hours of being free. And I know there are other counties and other people doing other things, but that seems pretty extravagant. Like, for example, I know Johnson County has more of 5 days or 7 days they can return if they've had a test. I know we have issues with tests made available and the types of tests that we have right now. So I'm just asking that maybe we spend a little bit more time about getting kids back to school quicker, especially if they weren't sick, and may not need to be sent home in the same way, how they return to school, things of that nature. And then my biggest ask is that these kids that do get sent home, how are we going to support them? How are we going to provide education for them? 10 days is a hell of a long time, sorry for my language, for a kid to be on their own learning. Baldwin School did not provide Zoom calls, they did not provide teacher educating them throughout the day. They had to do it on their own. That's even how the higher law was. So the fact is that we need to have a plan. They did not see anything whatsoever, and I have not heard a single bit of communication on how we're going to do that. And that's the highest priority right now, is how we're going to support those kids. Because I do believe there's going to be some that are at some point in time that do have to quarantine. As other related to mask, I did want to point out that there are other things that are happening to kids. Family members who recently had surgery on the back of their ear because of blood mask positive. There's such a huge shift that was created there, and not going to be able to wear masks going forward. So keep in mind that there are lots of situations where one size fits all just does not work. And I also think that it's not okay for any of these kids to be bullying anybody because they're wearing a mask. It's a choice. Let these kids wear masks. So the rest of us can have our freedom and our choices that we want to make. No kid should be, that should not ever be encouraged or anything like that. I was looking at the numbers for enrollment, and all should be really concerned because our taxpayer dollars also in our enrollment is how our teachers get paid. The more teachers that we losing because our enrollment going down, we lost 68 kids last year from the start end of the previous year to this year. Well, with nurse data. 2020, we had 1,366 kids, 2021, we had 1,298. If we're not providing the proper education, we're not providing proper facilities. We didn't have football field last year for our kids to participate in, and nobody was allowed to go to sporting events. So I just want to make sure we're keeping things open and we're providing reasons why kids want to come to school to Baldwin to live in our community as well. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? And then, yeah, you'll go. Okay. Go ahead.
Good evening, I'm Heather Courtney. I have nieces in the school district. I raise all my kids in the school district, which are 4, actually 8, with my blended family. And I have grandkids coming through the school district. I thank you for your positions. I thank you for being here tonight. I thank you for what you did last week. One thing that has not been mentioned yet, a little bit, Carrie, I think, was what are we doing when we get sick? We go to the doctor and we get medicine. There's medicine out there. There's medicine for COVID that has proven effective on many, many cases. So I need to say that because what we've done to our kids the last 18 months is atrocious. We cannot keep taking freedoms. We took God out of school a long time ago, and that was our first mistake. That needs to be brought back even. And with that comes freedom. So I just want you to think about that because there are helps for those. COVID is real. I know it's killing people, but where's the truth? You can't listen to your Joe Blow media. Fauci has been, I mean, there's been some things that have just been very questionable that's been come up from him. So I love everybody. And everybody's important and their voices need to all be heard. That truth needs to stand. Thank you.
Thank you.
All the top people, hope you can hear me. My name is Linda Banks, and my husband and I moved here 21 years ago because we wanted our future children to attend the Baldwin School District. 8 months for your self-explanatory. Just kidding. I love my little thing. I have 2 teenage daughters in high school, a junior and a freshman, and I'm here to share with you how last September's quarantine changed our family dynamic, our daughter's education, and their overall mental well-being. Last September, my 8th graders volleyball team was quarantined for 14 days, even though they were not in close proximity to the infected child. As a result of this quarantine, our community decided we would pull both girls out of school and put both of them in online learning. I did not want to put them back in school, only to be quarantined again if they were exposed or came in close proximity to someone who contracted, wrong probably, or was exposed to COVID. They needed this consistent form of learning. In March of this year, we put our 8th grader back in school when the in-school full-time option became available because the COVID numbers in Douglas County were declining. She needed to get back to face-to-face instruction with her teachers and desired that socializing with her classmates. We're fortunate she's a resilient child. Our sophomore at the time did not have a good experience going online school. She needs to be face-to-face instruction and guidance from her teachers. She struggled the entire school year, especially in math. Her father and I were in mental health. We hadn't been in high school for 35 years, and the problem-solving method for math is very difficult for us now. Our family had a lot of arguments related to schoolwork this past year. We had a lot of tearful nights related to schoolwork this past year. We had a lot of talks about depression and anxiety related to schoolwork this past school year. She completely gave up on doing her schoolwork. Yes, I did reach out to the school for guidance. But yes, I did reach out to the school for guidance, but there was a little bit to do for her. Their hands were tied because of guidelines put in place for our school based on COVID numbers outside of our community. They did, however, offer her to come to school for an hour a day to have the librarian help her with math because he was good at it. He was not a math teacher. They did not want her anywhere else in the school to seek help because she had been doing online learning and they needed to focus on the in-school students. She was not allowed to go back to in-school learning in March because the electives she chose through her online courses were not offered at UHS, and therefore she would lose her graduation credits. We were not allowed to let that happen. In the end, her and I worked tirelessly into the late evening hours to get her schoolwork to a passing grade. We never had an evening of relaxation or family time. In conclusion, I will not allow anyone to put my children through this again. I will remove my daughters from this district if you choose to use the same quarantine guidelines as the 2021 school year. I sincerely hope that you take into consideration the mental well-being of those children, like my daughter, before you implement a quarantine policy that could have severe mental health catastrophe, unfortunately like suicide. My daughter's mental health is just as important as the physical health of those children that are high risk for COVID. I wish you all the very best in your decision making, and I thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
Hello, my name is Dan Carr. I just want to say a few things just related to the information. One is that the PCR test does not work, and the CDC is finally admitting this. If you want to look up, please do. It's on the CDC. Many of us have known this for a year because it's a part of a major lawsuit in The Hague with Riley Kuhlman, who is probably the most premier lawyer in the world. And Kansas found out it from a guy that invented it. And it was never even intended to be used to find virus. So it is not, I don't know even test people in quarantine with a PCR test that doesn't work. So and all your data is based on testing and cases. So that is also fraudulent. I hate to say we don't believe it. And I know we've really got down to a matter of belief because the science is just incorrect. But I think I do have a solution that we could attempt to the situation where people want masks, don't want masks. We voted last week, and I really appreciate that we wouldn't have a mask mandate. But the problem is that the mask mandate goes and violates the state constitution. There are already lawsuits underway against Lawrence schools in 497. They will be sued for enforcing their mask mandate. Okay. I think it would be possible to have a kind of exchange program because I've talked to a lot of parents of the Lawrence area who don't want to be this coercive action where they're going to have their kids coerced by other kids and the environment with the federal government on top, coercing them to get vaccinations. So we can offer an exchange program here. They can come down here and go to school. Anyone whose kids want to go somewhere where there is a mask mandate, any school in Lawrence will have it. And it's possible to do. I know it's oh, we can't do that, but I'm sure we can. I'm sure we can. I think that's what holds us back in our public schools a lot of times. We don't want to find it. We just want to do what we've always done. But we are a sovereign entity here The Douglas County Health Board has nothing to do with this school district. It has nothing to do. If you want to get it from the Attorney General, we got it from the horse's mouth, face to face. I mean, nobody's going to intercede. I talked to the school district, our Janet Wall, our representative in District 1. She said, it is your thing. It is it's all local. There's nothing we can do. We're not going to save you. We're not going to help you. Okay, so we're on our own. If we did have a vote, I'm kind of astounded that we have a meeting this quickly. Well, we can't even get something on the agenda. But the other side, the literal contingent here in the area, they can meet what? In 2 days, 3 days, how do you do that? Well, it certainly shows that there's a bias on the board out there. But we want to work with you guys. I really appreciate the vote. I was really happy, and I fear that somehow that's not going to be left to stand. I'm just so suspicious of the board. I think there's going to be some technicality. It was Monday, and subclause B, we couldn't actually have that vote, so we're going to have to do it again, and we've all changed our mind. I hope that's not what happened. Certainly hope that's not what happened, and it should be what happens. But I've given you a viable alternative. If you want to look into it, we can do it. It should please everyone. And when you get kids from up there down here, they're probably going to be minority kids and conservative kids, because that's who I am. Mostly minority kids are not on board for the vaccines, and they're not on board for the mask mandate. So we would go to our inclusion program. We would just be win-win everywhere. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
Hi, I'm Tori Yardley. I just want to come and say thank you for voting last week to start the year as 2019. I really appreciate that. I just applaud you for allowing parents to have the liberty of choice. And that's all I ask, is to be able to choose for my family and my children. I do have 2 kids in the district. They will be enrolled at the beginning of this school year. I hope that can remain throughout the school year. The reason I want to speak is because I'm a single working mother. On your prevention measures, it says the district will follow the Douglas County Public Health guidelines for quarantine exclusion. That is concerning to me because, like I said, having my kids at home by themselves, potentially, even if they're not at risk, have antibodies, whatever the case may be. I just ask that you take that into consideration as I went through phase before. But like I've also said before, what is going to get our children the education that they're going to need? Can we, when we're going through this and when you all are discussing it, can we please have the back of our minds our kids' education? Because again, that's why we're all here. And that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
Hello, Jennifer Murray. I have a son at the high school. That's a really weird to say because my daughter just graduated. But I'm going to give the other side just a little bit. My son last year started out the school district in the hybrid model. And unfortunately was sent home on one of the 14-day quarantines because a member of the football team became infected. My son never showed any symptoms, was never sick, got behind, was home, and during his time home decided he wanted to flip to the online model because he didn't want to wear a mask at school all day. It made him feel bad. He didn't like any aspect of it. So we switched. We were I think 4.5, 5 weeks into the school year when the football team was at home. So then we found out that he had to start from the very beginning for going online, that none of his work, the 4 weeks he was in school, counted. So I gave him that option and told him what he would have to do in order to make that switch. He was successful with the online program. He caught up, he stayed caught up, he did his work, he still attended his sporting events and was able to move forward. I know some kids weren't as fortunate, and not all kids had parents on them when they weren't doing what they were supposed to. However, that was a choice he made because he didn't want to wear a mask. And he's old enough to have that conversation with me. So I feel sorry for the littles who couldn't make that choice and didn't have that option. So I want to say thank you for giving them the opportunity to start this coming school year normal and in a way that they can be with their friends and be back in learning and get back to what we're supposed to be here for, and that is the education of our children. So I just want to say thank you. I hope and look forward to my son actually physically being back in the school. And I hope we don't have to change what our plans are because of changes that others want to force on parents who choose not to mask their children. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak?
Hi, my name is Rachel Callahan, and I am here today on behalf of my 4 children that do attend the school district. It has been a struggle with the masks, and what I feel like when I put a mask on my child is I'm putting a muzzle to send my kid to school. If a parent wants their child to wear a mask, by all means let them do it. I have no issue standing here today. You know, it's freedom of choice. You should be able to wear one. You shouldn't have to. It should not be forced upon. It shouldn't be forced upon everybody. My son started kindergarten last year wearing a mask, and I would get pictures throughout the day from the seesaw, and he would be sitting within his classroom at the table, isolated from everybody else that was sitting at his table with dividers. If a mask is really helping, why should we be isolating these kids from friends or whoever? You know, that really kind of infuriated me. You know, cases did go up, even though we had a mandate. It was running through the school. Cases were hitting remote students that weren't even attending the school. Let's see, school events got canceled. My daughter was the one that lost her last few weeks of volleyball because the whole team got quarantined. So her last year of junior high, there went her volleyball, and she was pretty disappointed about that. She never exhibited any signs or symptoms, nothing. You know, mental health is huge, and I think that continuing to force a kid to wear a mask is, you know, it's the mental health, and living the twilight zone every day. So, you know, that's just how I think it should be left up to choice. I don't think that these kids should have to wear a mandate. What's good for one doesn't necessarily mean it's good for the other. So it should be up to the parents. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak tonight? Okay. I think we got it then. Thank you all for coming and for speaking. I know that people have different degrees of comfortability or complete lack thereof with getting up and speaking in front of people in general, but particularly when it's something that, you know, is an emotional topic and is close to your heart. And that's something that every person in this room has in common because everyone is here speaking about their children. So even with the different opinions about what should and shouldn't be done, everyone is here because they care about their kids. And that's something that that every single person in this room has in common. So thank you for coming and for being willing to speak in front of the board, because I know that's not an easy thing to do. With that, we will go ahead and move forward from public comment and move on to old business, which is the COVID-19 protocols.
Well, last Monday, certainly the board was voting that night, which they were going to masks, and several other things, but that, of course, motivated us to put together some specific protocols to go along and match what we wanted that evening, which is in the protocols that you see there. Most certainly trying to meet what the board asked, but I felt like we needed to get these out and let the board discuss them this evening on what they like or don't like about them, and why certain parts are in here and others maybe not. But anyway, several pages there, and I know you guys have had a few days to look those over and wanted to see where you're at.
Okay, well, we can start with the easy one because I know people are still thinking and I want everybody to jump in. But one thing that I would like to see us amend, and I'd asked Mr. Dorothy and administrators about this, was that we have a specific statement added to the protocols under the masking section about bullying. We have bullying policies already in place through district policy and through state mandates, but tying what is already in our handbooks with whatever people's personal choices, and it works both ways. But Mr. Dorothy had, I think, forwarded that to us. So we're a long ways from approving, but the statement suggested to be added or amended to would be under the masking section. Quote, any bullying related to mask wearing will not be tolerated and may result in disciplinary consequences in line with the building's handbooks and district state policies regarding bullying. So it just ties what we already have to masking in of itself, meaning that that counts too. And let's not bully kids based on whether they are or are not. So I did want to bring that up. And then there's other things that have been brought up here and in other places. So I'd like to turn it over to the board for discussion on other pieces too.
I have one that kind of ties right in with that, and that kind of has to do with the idea that one of the ways that you're going to get bullying is making two separate classes, you know, people that are wearing masks, not wearing masks. And one of the things that's outlined in that protocol is there's quite a few differences. I'm going to pull it back up so I can make sure I don't misspeak, but there were quite a few differences throughout the protocols when it had to do with somebody who's vaccinated or not vaccinated. So rather than having two separate sets of rules, I think we should have one set of rules. And if we fall down on the side of being, you know, being more strict or less strict, whatever, I think there should be one set of rules. I don't really feel like having the secretaries at the front desk have to determine whether somebody's telling the truth or lying about whether they're vaccinated, and then policing them through the hallways, making sure that they're keeping 3 feet away. And then about the quarantine, I think, again, it should be whatever we decide to wind up being, it should be the same for whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated. I hesitate. I mean, the vaccination is the term that we use, but I think that everybody is pretty well understands the idea that it's not a vaccination in the sense that same as my measles vaccination, right? It doesn't keep me from getting it. It doesn't keep me from transmitting it. It's designed to keep my symptoms low. So even if I'm vaccinated, I can still get it and I can still spread it. So I fail to see the logic behind making somebody who is not vaccinated quarantine, but somebody who's vaccinated doesn't have to quarantine when they're still just as able to spread it and just as able to get it. So I think that in order to help prevent the bullying, I think there should be just one set of rules independent of somebody's vaccination status, whatever that winds up being as we'll talk through it.
Mm-hmm.
Other discussion on that?
I do have a quick question here, related to the county's recommendation around quarantines. I'm having trouble locating the specific number of days. If anybody can help me locate that, that'd be helpful. But, and I've seen our document, it lists out 10 days quarantine, but also in reference to deferring to Lawrence Douglas County public health guidelines too.
I believe the last recommendation was 10 days.
Okay.
But they're also going by the vaccinated and unvaccinated part that it was concerned about.
Oh, I got you. Okay. Is this working actually? No, no, okay. Every time. I'll eventually get this figured out. I'm gonna get it figured out this time.
Megan got one for you.
Oh, you're just swap me.
First try.
Okay, all right. So on, oh, I don't know what page this is. On the, where it says close contact and then advising staff, all on the same page there. We have quarantine is 10 days following the last exposure, as well as district will follow, just below that, district will follow Lawrence Douglas County public health guidelines for quarantine and isolation. I think maybe we just need one of those statements and not both of them, or putting our own number in there if that's allowable. But it seems like it could, like if they change their guidelines to 14 days or something, we would be out of compliance with that, I think.
Okay.
Or we have confusion there, you know?
No, I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. Understand, I want to make sure the district has never had a quarantine policy. Did we do a lot of quarantines last year? Yes, we did. The only quarantine policy was what was done by the county. But certainly the district did not legally have authority to quarantine anybody other than to talk with parents and inform them. The county was the only entity that could quarantine people. So I want to make sure we understand that when we start talking about quarantine policies, because we as USD 348 never had a quarantine policy itself. We were following what the county was dictating when we would report that we had cases. So this is important.
Is that
And
different
I get what
now?
you're saying there, that could go out of compliance real quick.
Right.
Yeah.
So does the district currently now have, because of that Senate bill, have the authority to establish quarantine guidelines, or do we still have to defer to the
I
county?
think that's a legal issue. Whether the district has authority to quarantine on its own.
But the county still retains that ability,
Yes.
with the understanding. Okay. Okay.
So to clarify, Mike, I guess along the same lines, just so I can understand. So if we let's just to play out a scenario, if we said we're not going to do any kind of quarantining, and somebody came and went to the county and said, hey, they're not doing quarantining, could the county then has the authority to come down here and take kids out of school to quarantine them? I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I'm just so I can know where we are from a legal standpoint.
I don't know if I can answer that or not. You know, usually
Good question.
Lisa would do her contact tracing. She would call them and say, here's what we have. They would then say, okay, this is this person, this, and they would determine that at that time. Right. Would they come down here? I don't know, Phil.
That's why, does it matter what we say? I mean, if they have the authority to overrule us and say, oh, you're going to do 10 days of quarantining, it doesn't matter if we say we're going to do 5 or not. I mean, it doesn't make sense to make rules and give people a sense of what's going to happen and then just to be overruled by a higher authority. So I don't know. And I don't know if that's a question for Brad or something.
I need to get a better answer for you, Phil.
Yeah, this is a bit of a tangent, but also related. So several years ago, I think we had a stomach flu outbreak at the junior high in which we encroached upon like 20% of our kids were out sick. And at that point, I believe we had some conversations with the county about, I don't know if it was mandated closing or just recommended closing, but there is some sort of provision when we, as a public health policy, when such and such percentage of kids are out sick, they recommend at least closing the school down for, floor to ceiling kind of cleaning. do we know if that sort of policy, am I remembering that right, that we had the situation pop up, or is that,
Yeah.
were they recommending?
If we, over the years, anytime we've had a large number of kids out for a sickness of some kind, flu in general, where we have a lot of kids out, most certainly I would make a contact with the county and say, here's where we stand. Are we at a point where we would want to close? At that time, most of the time I was informed, well, how long do you want to close for? Way before any of this stuff we got into.
Yeah.
And they said, well, how long do you want to close? And I said, well, day, 2 days, do we need to close? Does that help? Most of the time, their recommendation was, I wouldn't close.
Okay.
Because it will take, in order to clear flu out, it might take up to 2 weeks. So we've never gone there. Okay. Even when some of our numbers got pretty high and we tried to do other mitigation, cleaning, and trying to do some of those things.
Okay.
That we never got to that.
Okay, that's helpful. I was thinking of the question that came up earlier about, is there a metric in which we have to start considering more rigorous layered protections? If we hit, as an example, if we hit 15% of our kids, 20% of our kids are out sick for whatever reason, do we need to increase our, bring back a mask mandate, increase AB schedules or something like that to where we could help to mitigate that spread? But I wondered if we bumped up against some sort of county recommendation that they would just straight up shut you down at 30% no matter what happened, if we needed to be aware of that kind of percentage.
Well, there is a specific percentage that
There is or is not?
is not.
Okay. I really wanted a definitive answer.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deb.
Is it worth going through the protocol line by line so we don't miss anything and just kind of say, okay, does anybody have anything they want to change with this? Anybody think you want to change with this? Anything you want to change with that? And then going through that to make sure we hit all the points and we don't miss anything.
Yeah, I think so. How do we want to keep track of?
I mean, I'd be happy to read through it. I mean, or if Kelly, if you want to, or just.
No, I don't mind. That would be awesome if you would read through it, because I'm looking for the answer to another question simultaneously. But if you could read it into the microphone.
Okay.
That way, so if people can both hear and then also hear it at home.
I've been space barring. I'm unmuting myself. And can everybody hear me, or do I need the microphone? I hate microphones. Okay.
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 Thank you.
Yeah.
That would be really helpful.
Okay. So then. Let me pull back up. My phone shut off. Okay, so the first line is vaccination. USD 348 strongly encourages all staff and students eligible for the COVID-19 vaccine to be vaccinated prior to the start of the school year or as soon as possible. I mean, I don't see anybody does anybody have a problem with that one? Okay, so next bullet point, the district will continue to provide educational information to students, staff, and families about the COVID-19 vaccination. Stop me if you want to say something on it then. All right, USD 348 will continue to work with local public health officials to provide vaccination opportunities for staff, students, and families. Staying home when appropriate. The district recommends and will continue to educate and encourage staff, students, and families to follow public health and safety measures in and out of school. I'll give a little pause in case somebody wants to jump in. Okay. All right. The district recommends staff, students, and parents use a daily self-assessment to self-monitor for signs and symptoms of illness. Anyone experiencing symptoms of COVID-19, such as fever greater than 100, cough, or shortness of breath, should stay home and seek medical advice as necessary. Maybe we should put 100 degrees Fahrenheit in there instead. So nobody gets confused. Okay.
Not Celsius.
Yeah, not Celsius.
No.
You'd be dead.
They should stay home.
Loophole.
Yeah.
All right. Staff and families should notify school officials if they or their children have COVID-19 symptoms, test positive for COVID-19, or are waiting for test results, or have been exposed to someone with symptoms or a confirmed or suspected case while not fully vaccinated. So there, I would have an issue with that and say that, I don't think vaccination status should have anything to do with it, because again, the vaccine is not preventative. It's to lessen your symptoms. You still can get it and you can still transmit it. So I would strike vaccine unless fully vaccinated on there. I mean, that.
In the wording, I would like, I think, you know,
Give me a paper copy.
this will sound a little bit tangential, but I don't mean it that way, but here's the bottom line, to just speak plainly. Part of what's been causing all of this, people don't like to be told what to do, right? I mean, this is part of what's driving things that are happening, not just in Baldwin, but everywhere. But I would like language in there that instead of should, can we, you know, for the sake of everyone, I mean, something that is a little more, in the spirit of looking out for one another, we would really like you to ask to be in partnership with your school, because this can help everybody. I mean, I think even saying it like that creates invitation and not should. And I know that's a small thing, but I think small things are really rubbing people right now. And it's not what we mean, but it contributes to these walls between us. It's minor, but I think even some of the language in that could be tweaked to be more invitational in that sense.
Well, I don't think that no matter where you fall in how you feel about masks, I don't think anybody's going to knowingly be sick and come to school, or knowingly be sick and try to spread that. So I agree with you 100%. I think that there should be definitely some language in there saying we, you know, be a team player or whatever. But
right.
I think that's a good idea.
Can we add? Oh, shut up!
Here.
I can
Hand
turn
off.
back on.
Hand off.
Could we add that kind of a statement to the very beginning? Say USD 348 in conjunction or in partnership with the members of our community.
Yeah.
Work to
Lead with that.
create a safe learning environment for all of our kids and community as a whole, or some such thing like that. I mean, pretty adult language, but I think something like that,
Yeah.
declarative at the beginning would be helpful.
Mr. Dorothy, it looks like you're writing these down.
I'm getting there.
I just making sure somebody was writing them down so we don't lose all these good ideas.
Golden nuggets here.
Are you writing down too, Megan?
Nope, I wasn't, but I
Okay.
sure can.
Yeah, let's,
If you need a pen, I brought one for you.
I threw it at you.
thank you. Just grab it when you, then you don't have to mess with that. I'll just leave it right there.
Okay, so then we're still on staying home when appropriate.
Well, Phil, before you,
Yeah.
what are the mechanics here? If we get, let's say we go through, let's say we want to eliminate the references to vaccinated. Except maybe, are we going to go through, are we agreeing on a motion here as we're going through this thing and checking off things? And that's what we're going to vote on? What are we doing?
Well, I think the idea was to go through and then everybody speak up if there's something you either agree with or change so that we can
But
create.
it's possible to
something.
speak up and not have a majority feeling, yeah, that's what I want. So
If-
we're a document that is ready to be voted on at the end of this?
That would be my intention.
I think that was I think that was the goal, was to vote on that tonight, but if not all the board members are ready.
So in
to
other
do
words,
that.
Phil was going on to the next motion, the next item, and I don't know if we have agreement on, are we striking vaccinated or not?
Oh, right. Well, that was my point, was to bring that up, to have a discussion on it and decide whether we're
So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, this is not a motion.
No.
This is a,
We're gonna have to go back and reference what we're doing here at some point. And what are we gonna vote on?
Yeah, that's why I wanted to make sure somebody's writing it down.
yeah. So this is just discussion so that everybody has a chance to,
At the end of 8 pages, we're gonna have Paul's notes and we're gonna strike all the vaccinated references. That's our,
I don't think we'll
you have a
talk.
different idea of how to do it.
Yeah,
What's a better way? I'm open for whatever. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I see Andy's point. I don't know how to, other than maybe going section by section, chunking out and having a motion on each section. Possible, but because otherwise, to your point, there might be 35 changes that none of us would be happy with, but we need to kind of chunk
Right.
that out
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
in order to get the.
this all goes back to my loathing of writing by committee, I guess. But I'm just worried we're gonna end up and not know exactly what we're voting on.
Well, we don't want that.
Could we make edits and then vote on it later? Make the edits that we discuss and then vote on it later?
That's what I expected. I just wanted us to be sure we understand what we have edited in each section.
So procedurally, it is not on the agenda, that it doesn't say COVID-19 protocol vote. So if we just have our discussions, because I want everybody to make sure they have that opportunity, then another way to do it is then Mr. Dorothy, Megan, with those notes that we are all collectively taking, they go back and then incorporate the results of our discussion. If we need to vote on it another time, we can certainly do that.
Okay.
If
Well,
that's.
that's really what I was getting to.
Okay.
Are we assembling a document here that we're going to vote on tonight? Or are we assembling a document for further review, reviewing?
So
and action?
here's the
I'm not
thing.
understanding, I'm sorry.
However you guys want to work through this, but certainly this was set up as a template for you guys to work from. So most certainly how you guys want to do it is how you do it. What I would say is parents are needing to know, we're 3.5 weeks from the first day of school. They need to know how this is going to be, one way or the other. So if you don't do it tonight, we need to meet again soon, because we've got to get this out. Even waiting from last Monday to this Monday, people want to know how school started. I get people who need daily about Mr. Dorothy, are we doing masks, are we not doing masks, or, the different things that are there. So I'm just saying, however you guys do it, we can't take tons of time because parents are needing to know what this is going to be.
Right. Well, to Andy's point, I certainly, it was not my intention to kind of rush this through or anything like that.
No,
I just want to make sure that we do go through this line by line. I feel like I probably, and mostly myself, there are things that we vote for that are big, long statements that we don't go through line by line. I feel like this has enough, bearing and impetus on the school year. I think we should go through it line by line and come to a consensus. And my hope would be whether we vote on it tonight or we have a special board meeting tomorrow night or what, but I do think we should go through it line by line and then come up to, like your point. I think there should be a full document we all get to see and look at. And if Megan wants to type really fast and then email it, call us and we can look at it, and do it. And that happens tonight. I'm happy to stay as long as that takes. But I do think we should go through it line by line or section by section.
I just want to see if we're getting consensus as we go, or if we're going to have a chance to look at a finished document and say yay or nay.
Yeah, my hope would be both. Like, I don't want to go through if somebody disagrees or wants to talk about it, I think before we move on to the next section, we should have a little bit of consensus so that when we do get the final document, it's really just nothing more than read it, make sure it's what we thought it was going to say, and then stamp it.
So let me just say, while we're on that last paragraph, I'm interested in your idea to strike references to vaccination status. But as I brought up last week, I think we're not going to be able to police that. I don't think we have a desire to. So, but I need to see it in the full context of the document and see every instance of it to be sure that I'm. Okay. Here, I just want to note that when it comes up, like, okay, this one makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't. If I said something like I want to strike all that.
But that's why I'm glad you're doing this, because I want a chance to see those all in context.
Yeah, and I don't really want to strike vaccine references. What I want to do. Okay. So.
I was just thinking maybe if there's any other big ideas that might be applicable throughout the document, such as, do we want to treat vaccinated as the same as unvaccinated?
Right.
That's a big idea that would be applicable throughout the document. So, and I like also always softening the language and so not put on people in that all the time. Not should or have to. That language so much. So to agree that we want to soften the language, we want to, if we agree on vaccinated and unvaccinated should be one and the same. Are there other big ideas to agree on first? We won't have to go, we know we're going to
And just to address your concern, Kelly, you're okay with a statement of philosophy at the beginning instead of swapping out every word should for a paragraph that says, just so you know, here's what should mean.
Yeah.
Have an asterisk by each one in a little statement at the bottom. I shouldn't be seen through this.
Parentheses, just be nice. Another big idea part of this is that I do think it would be good for us to address, and the public may not know this, but this is stuff that we've been working on with ESSER funds and creating positions, creating student success.
Oh, yes.
Teachers, there also are things that are being done that to meet additional needs this year. We're working on that stuff all the time, though it may not appear that way by attending these most recent meetings, because so much of it has been dominated on to wear or not to wear a mask. But in terms of student success aspects and support for students, I do think a reference of that, if students need to be at home, whether they're legitimately sick, they need additional support. So those things will help them too. But some reference of that, it doesn't need to be an encyclopedia of information. They'll get that from their respective building leaders, but just to know that that is a priority from the district, I think might be helpful in this document.
I like that. I also want to know that this is recorded, so you get to.
Continue. All right, so I think we were staying home when appropriate. Bullet point 4, staff and families should notify school officials if their children have COVID-19 symptoms, test positive for COVID-19, are waiting for test results, or have been exposed to someone with symptoms or confirmed or suspected case while not fully vaccinated. So that's one that I would switch out and just say that we just leave off the while not fully vaccinated, because again, anybody who has it should let everybody know. All right, the district will provide this to staff information about recognizing COVID-19 signs and symptoms, hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette. Schools will continue to educate and encourage students and staff to wash their hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds, or if soap and water are not available, to use hand sanitizer. Or what's that one?
Persona.
Yeah. What is text turn? I don't know what that is.
It's something that they've used at the elementary school all last year to sanitize hands.
Oh, hand sanitizer.
Yes,
okay.
Basically.
Okay. Schools will continue to educate and encourage students and staff to cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue, throw tissues in the trash, and wash hands immediately. Or if soap and water are not available, use hand sanitizer or hand sanitizer. Cloth face coverings, masks, and personal protective equipment. Masks are optional for staff and students this year unless conditions call for a change. I think we'll probably have to come back to that and put something in there that says what's going to call. Do we need to decide what's going to call for a change? I feel like that's kind of open-ended.
Yeah, yes, because that was your point earlier.
Yeah, I think we need to have some sort of metric, and I don't know whether we have the right data here to this conversation right now, but I think that's important to establish, again, whether it's the 20% absence rate that we go to AB days or whatever that might be. But I think it's important for families to know when we hit that threshold, when we're nearing that threshold, they're wanting to be extra diligent at home or at the grocery store, or whatever it might be, to kind of help to mitigate that spread.
So do we leave that for now just to be determined? I mean, like to be decided?
I wrote down data of some kind of my note.
Okay, to find something. So that would be one that we'll have to
You
fill in as
raised
we
that
figure
last
that out.
Monday night.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm still again.
Do it.
So we, last year we used that county metric that was problematic at best to kind of help adjust our plans there. And, because Lawrence is washing out the data for Baldwin, but also, a lot of us work in Lawrence, work in Kansas City. So it's not like we're just an isolated community necessarily, but having a more strategic, and we know more than we knew last year as well about how this is spread and what kind of data we can utilize. Like, I think attendance rates is a very important one for us to look at, because especially with the wide variety of symptoms that COVID has, it might just be a sniffles at home. You keep your kid home, and not think about getting them tested necessarily, but that still should be somehow accounted for in that metric for us as well. But regardless, I think it's helpful to have a rubric. I think we saw one last year from DeSoto or Spring Hill that had kind of a bit more dynamic nature to it. They made themselves something along those lines would be helpful for our community to be aware of. And I think they probably have lots of ideas about what that should look like too. But
Let's see if I can find that.
So we'll just leave that as an empty space to get filled in.
Insert
here.
metrics.
Okay. All right, so bullet point 1, it is highly recommended that masks be worn indoors. The district will not request proof of vaccination and requests the cooperation and support of all members of the school community in maintaining safe environments for all students and staff. Staff will provide mask breaks for students that wish to wear masks. Special education teams will work with families to determine appropriate use of personal protective equipment based on student individual needs. And I think that was what one of our constituents was referencing. And I don't think that you should read that and say that the SPED teachers are going to be deciding what they're going to be wearing. I think that's more like working in collaboration with the parents to decide what the parents think is appropriate and how the school can manage that, I think, as opposed to them deciding, oh, they have to do this.
That's how I read it.
Yeah.
Okay. The district will make masks, face shields, and gloves available to staff and students as needed. The district will make N95 NIOSH masks available to staff as needed. The district will provide gowns to staff performing procedures where contact with bodily fluids is likely. So continuing.
There's the bullying statement.
What's that?
Right after that is.
Oh, okay. Then right inserted in there is the bullying statement.
Yes, please.
All right. Do you want to say the wording of that, or is that?
Do you need it now? Or do you have it?
I don't have it.
Or do you want me to? I can read it aloud again.
Got it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. It is any bullying related to mask wearing will not be tolerated. Is that, am I going too fast?
No.
Okay,
Great.
sorry. And may
Start at
result,
the beginning again.
okay.
It's short.
Any bullying related to mask wearing
I have this. I don't know why.
okay, we good? So that's where that's gonna go.
Okay.
Don't do it, be nice. Okay,
Yeah, right.
move on.
Okay, temperature and symptom screening. The district encourages staff, students, and visitors to use devices provided for temperature checks when needed. Schools will conduct temperature checks when staff or students report COVID-19 symptoms.
Okay. Do all the buildings have that digital screener thing, like the monitor? I know the elementary buildings do, but do the junior high and high school all have those?
High school does. I don't know if the.
Junior
Junior
highs
high
is in
does,
the
okay.
entryway.
Okay.
They what?
The junior highs is in the entryway when you first walk.
They do have one though.
Okay, okay. So last year procedurally, did all students go in front of that or get some sort of temperature check as they came in the building,
Well,
or was it voluntary?
either forehead, wrist, or walk in front of the screener.
Okay, so, okay.
We were not going to have the people standing at the door with the temperature things this year.
We were not going to, okay.
Not going
Okay.
to.
Just the machines.
Yeah, just the screeners would be there.
Yeah.
And then most certainly at any time there was, which is what this is saying, is that at any time we need to, we would have temperature thermometers to check people's temperature.
Okay. I guess I'm curious whether we should continue to screen when they come in.
Well, I mean, I guess
That's
kind of,
something,
yeah, as I say, kind of we are, if we have those walk in front of monitors that you can screen if you feel like you need to. I mean, I wasn't in the high school ever, but you know, I don't know how much of a bottleneck did that create. I mean, is it pretty onerous to have you know, a wrist or a forehead scan on every kid? And then what about the issues with, okay, just touch this kid's forehead with this thermometer. Now I'm touching this kid's, or you know, now we're having every screening. So does that screener need to be all gowned up? You know, if they're gonna be in that.
Well, we didn't, I don't think we did this last year for the people that were just checking temperatures. I don't know, guys, did that stack people up too much indoors in the mornings?
Not too bad.
Did that stack people up at the doors and stuff, get the temperatures taken? Brand, at the high school, was it a problem when the high school students came in to get their temperature checked?
No.
I mean, to me, what I want to do is eliminate things that make the day harder for kids or onerous or difficult. And if that's really the fact, I have no problem with getting temperature checks at the door.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry. It seems like a relatively easy thing for us to implement that might prevent 30 kids from getting stuck in quarantine for 14 days or 10 days or whatever the line is. But again, I'm not sure how much of a bottleneck it created or how much of a problem it was. And even from the staffing perspective too, I know we've got have to have people on and available to kind of help usher those students in the direction.
That's what I was thinking.
Okay.
Oh, okay. That makes it an easy decision then.
So we're talking about leaving the section as is?
Sounds like it. I mean, if we don't have the staff to be able to do it,
I feel like it's what Esther's funding.
Well, that's right. We can't fund that through.
Well, we had funded that through ESSER money, the first one, ESSER one, a little bit of ESSER one.
But it's not in ESSER two, and we'd have to wait
No,
for
it's
ESSER
not
three as well.
in ESSER two, assuming we won't do it, but there's ESSER three.
and we do have the self screener deals, like the cameras that show your face and the little outline of the person, and those will be up.
Yes, no reason not to.
And how many of those?
One in each building.
There's just one in each building, so if you don't have that and combined with staff doing it,
That would go.
it would create yeah.
Unless you came up with this a scenario where you had A through J test on Monday, day one, day two, and you just alternate days. Because I mean, if it really is important to get them all get screenings, and you can't do it as all on the same day, you could always say, okay, freshmen are this day, sophomores are this day. I mean, there's a way you could get everybody tested if you wanted to.
It would be my preference to still check temps, have a staff member there and make it flow smoothly and figure out how to pay for it.
So do we want to make that? So, I mean, I have no problem at all with supporting that. I mean, it's especially that, because again, that's a very low cost thing, and if it can help alleviate fear and be another check on what's going on, I'm fully in support of that.
And that just is one simple line instead of the two items we have there currently. Is that right?
Yeah, we'd have to reword those. I don't know if I don't.
All you have to do is say schools will conduct temperature checks when staff or students report to school.
Right.
Oh,
There
yeah.
don't need to be any conditions anymore. Just do it.
Yeah.
But how do we support, I mean, I'm all for this, obviously, but how do we support that with staffing and then also pay for it? Sorry to be the buzzkill on that. But we need to talk about that piece.
I'm not going to figure that out right now. I'm going to tell my administrators to figure it out.
Okay, okay,
Sometimes the board has to say, I want this done, figured out by Tuesday.
okay.
Okay, moving on. Testing and screening.
Oh, so I got one more question.
Oh, go for it.
Is the district participating in that county, I don't know what the program is called, but the randomized screening that we did like last November, December, in which the tests were administered to a random selection of staff members and students who signed up for?
That program would not necessarily be in place. What is in place is there's a very large grant that would provide tests to the school to be used or handed out to people to use whenever that is concerned about the PCR test.
Right.
Most certainly, I think that would be just a preliminary kind of test.
Okay.
To see whether somebody has something they need to do anything else with it.
Okay. But that county randomized program is not continuing, to your knowledge?
Not necessarily.
Okay. Yeah, if it was going to continue, I thought I ought to go here, but if it's not, then that's fine. Cool. Yep. Okay. Carry on, Phil.
All right, good. All right, so testing and screening, saliva-based PCR test kits are available upon request. Schools will provide saliva-based PCR test kits when staff and students report COVID-19 symptoms. Okay, defining cases. Staff will send anyone with a confirmed, probable, or suspected case of COVID-19 home to isolate until test results. So I have a little bit of grief with that. I feel like I'm basically leading into quarantine based on what somebody is thinking. I think it's appropriate if somebody comes in with a fever, they should probably get tested. But I guess that's kind of vague on suspected case. You know, I don't want to put that on a teacher that has somebody sneeze in the back of their classroom, and now they're taking it upon themselves to send somebody home or send somebody to go get tested. I feel like that's a little bit extra, probably too much pressure for them to be under, to have to be the screeners. I think certainly anybody with confirmed case test.
That would always be determined by the.
Oh, so they should say that then.
The staff member could send someone down to the office and he's sneezing, coughing, whatever the issue is. They send them down, and then the nurse would be the one to make the call to say, we have.
Okay, should we say?
Still have it in confirmed or probable case as determined by the school nurse.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
You got that, Paul?
What's that?
Did you get that wording?
Just add this.
Confirmed or probable case as determined by the school nurse.
Do we have a health aide too? Just thinking of, do we still have a, sorry, Ashley.
Is there always a school nurse? Is that a question?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Like if there's, and we have a health aide.
We have a rural ag health aide, which most of them are licensed nurses.
Oh, okay. So that term, so those terms would be fine to use nurse and cover several. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that way you're not just saying one when it could be three.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, next bullet point. Individuals with a confirmed, probable, or suspected case of COVID-19 should complete public health isolation requirements, 10 days from symptom onset and fever-free for 72 hours, or 10 days from collection of the specimen if asymptomatic. I think, well, on this one, at least for me, I would say absolutely for somebody with a confirmed case, right? They should do the 10 days quarantine, whether they're vaccinated or not. And then I have a hard time with the probable or suspected case. You know, I would want to have it be determined whether they had COVID or not before they're getting quarantined. You know, I don't want somebody getting quarantined because they have the flu or because they have a stomach bug or because they're allergic to cats and they spent the night at grandma's house who had cats, you know, and how they come into school with a runny nose and itchy eyes and look sick.
I think so too. And then the next bullet point addresses what probable is. So we need to determine if you're okay with that or not.
Okay, so strike suspected, and I think like you just said, Andy, that next line looks good. Okay, and then even the next line, confirmed case and probable case. Does that mean that somebody has a probable case, you know, they're playing volleyball and they're on with a team that gets quarantined, you know, has a case, that if they come to school and say, I've got a negative test, I don't have to quarantine then? Because by definition, then that makes it not a confirmed case, right? And even if it's a, you know, probable case, I think I'd have a hard time saying to somebody, look, you have COVID, you have to stay home, and they show me a little card that says, you know, COVID test negative. I mean, I can tell you, like going to the hospital to do a surgery, if they have a card that says COVID negative, I don't know what happened to them yesterday, and I don't know what happened to them the day before, the 5 days prior, but we're going into the OR to do surgery if they have a COVID negative within the last 24 hours.
So I see what you're saying here, but then that requires, I mean, at some point we have to be okay with asking people to do stuff, right? Because we are asking people to show proof of a negative COVID test. And then, but if you have people say, well, you can't trust the test, you can't trust the people, you can't trust it, then how do we face school policy with attendance? I just want to make sure we don't back ourselves into some other weird rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Because we have to have something.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I fall into the side that's a little bit suspicious of the PCR. I mean, I personally have had cases, like I said, we have to get a COVID test before we go to the OR with the patient. I've had a patient get to take the test, it's positive, and they wait 15 minutes to take it again, and now it's negative. And so now you have to have a tiebreaker, have to have a third one to be negative to say they're going to go, or they have. So I agree that the PCR test is not perfect, but I also think we have to have something to hang our hat on to say we've done something, you know, and I until something better comes along, even with all its imperfections, the PCR test is the best hook to hang a hat on, I think.
You guys okay with that?
So then that wording should say something along the lines of, if it's with a confirmed, PCR test confirmed negative, you can return from quarantine. Because I mean, we've heard from lots of people that I think that was one of the big issues for kids this year that they struggled with, was the idea of this quarantine. And I'm sure that there were kids at quarantine that had COVID, and I'm sure that there were kids that were quarantined that didn't have COVID. And again, my whole goal with everything is to mitigate and decrease the amount of cost to make sure that we can operate schools safely.
And at our schools, we have at our schools, we have tests available for families that need access to that. I mean, maybe their doctors in Lawrence or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they would have that option of getting a free test from school staff.
So in this instance, we are policing. We want word from doctor. We want some proof that there's a negative test.
I think so. When they fall into that, I mean, for me at least, if we're gonna be able to quarantine somebody on a probable case, so we don't have proof of it. We're just you were close to somebody that did have positive. We don't know that for sure you have it, and we're going to quarantine you. I think that we should give somebody an option, and not that they have to come back. They could do the quarantine for 10 days, but at least give them an option. If they look, I don't feel sick, I feel great, and I'm really good. I don't want to quarantine. I went to my doctor, I got this PCR test, or I spit in the tube at the nurse's office, and it came back negative. Then I think that we should be able to say, let them come back in.
I agree. I just want that verified. Yeah. Not just a call from mom saying we tested.
Right. No. Yeah. I think. Yeah. I do think that you should have to have the little card that says negative.
I agree.
I like that.
Okay, so did you get that, Mr. Dorothy?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll move on. Infection periods, positive cases, 48 hours prior to symptom onset, or 48 hours prior to specimen collection, to 10 days after symptom onset, or 10 days after specimen collection. I'm not sure what that is in there, or what are you trying to say with this bullet point?
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I don't think that needs to be in here. I'd strike the whole infection period thing, because we're already establishing what we're doing in the paragraph previous. I don't think we need to say anything under infection periods. Okay, close contact. Fully vaccinated individuals are exempt from quarantine unless symptomatic. To me, my deal would be, I don't think we should have one set of rules for vaccinated and one set of rules for unvaccinated. I think it should be one set of rules that's the same for everybody, because I think that is going to lead in, because I imagine the scenario where they've got the volleyball team and they get, just because we've talked about that, but now you get quarantined, you got 2 or 3 girls on the volleyball team that are not vaccinated, 2 or 3 that are, and all of a sudden, why these girls that are not vaccinated have to stay home, the vaccinated girls get to come back and play. I think that either we say you get quarantined just like we said in the previous bullet point, or you don't, or you have to, or everybody gets quarantined the same.
Yeah, I agree.
So as far as wording there, I would strike that line completely.
I get completely filled.
If we get more data that changes at a certain point or suggests that you cannot spread it even if you're vaccinated, to me, that would make that different. But I don't think there's enough there. That says that you can't, that you most likely won't, but that you can't. So I do agree that because of what we know now, which could change, I wouldn't feel comfortable having 2 sets of rules either, because you could still spread it even if your symptoms are lessened. So, yeah.
I need to ask a dumb question. This close contact section is defining what close contact is, yes?
Correct.
Because it's referenced elsewhere, because it matters as applied elsewhere in the document?
The only thing I could see is maybe it's kind of maybe hinting at what would give you an idea for a probable case, because clinical, that would maybe clinical evidence. I mean, so in there, because if we haven't got there yet, but like two bullet points further down, it says anyone who's not fully vaccinated with direct respiratory particle exposure, even if less than 10 minutes, basically if you got coughed on, you're making out with somebody with COVID, those would be all reasons that you would say that's a probable case.
Okay.
Would be the only
I'm just trying to determine what we're aiming at.
Right. Here. So I think I mean, so if we strike the first line completely, and then anyone who is not fully vaccinated, who is within 6 feet of an infected individual for longer than 10 minutes. I mean, I would just say if you're within 6 feet. You don't mind? I think
No, the battery over here died, by the way. I'm just having bad luck today with this once again. So question on the 6 feet thing, because later in the document, we have 3 feet recommendations here. And I don't know what the sound medical advice is on either one of those, but 3 feet's more prevalent in the document. So either way, I think we're gonna have it consistent.
Yep.
But I don't know. What
I would say change this one to 3 feet then to make it consistent.
I'm just, unless we're specifically trying to give nurses a definition here, I don't know what this whole section is.
I agree. I think probably, I think this was a little bit of, using some other examples and putting something together probably is something that made its way in.
Right, I get it. I just.
Yeah. I mean,
because if we start eliminating the vaccinated references here, we're left with a couple words.
Yep.
And the last bullet is quarantine is 10 days.
Right.
Is
So
that
just,
all we need?
I'm all for striking this because you've already got, I mean, you've
Am
got
I missing
probable
context
case.
in this?
No.
Well, be careful. If you guys are gonna dictate close contact, if you guys wanted to dictate what that's gonna be, you better do it here. If not, and you don't give any direction, I know where the direction is gonna come from. It's gonna come from up there.
Okay,
Most
so that's
certainly,
the,
it's gonna include probably some of the.
okay.
So.
I was looking where you're pointing. You said it's gonna come from there. I was like,
Oh, more.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there is value to, you think, Paul, in defining this close contact.
Maybe the sections should be called quarantine.
Well, you should maybe call it probable case definition. Because that's what we've talked about it being up here. Because we've got two definitions for things: probable cases and confirmed cases. And that probable case lacks a definition up there. So you could change this section to being probable case. What defines a probable case? Being in close contact with. You could just you say close contact. And I don't.
In other words, there is a probable cause colon section up above, but it does not go into mention close contact.
Right.
If it did, then
so if you still think
I get it.
yeah, I'm okay with crossing this off. I'm trying to. I mean, I think the shorter the document,
I'm
the
not
better.
going to cut out a tool away from our nurses if this is required. I just feel like if we eliminate all the vaccinated, unvaccinated distinctions, there's not much left.
Yeah. Okay, so, well, certainly you guys are getting the area that I'm not.
Yeah, and I apologize, Paul.
No,
If we were
that's
going to do this
okay.
in
I'm
some,
getting where you guys want to go with this. What I will tell you, if you completely scratch that out of there, please look it on the phone. Okay, here's a case, this kid confirmed has it. Now, I'm figuring close contacts, she's gonna get on the phone, she's gonna call the county, over there. She's gonna call the county, and then, they're going to say, well, are they fully vaccinated? And she's gonna say, well, some of these are, some of these aren't. And then they're gonna say, well, these fully vaccinated don't, and these do. That's why I say if you don't designate how you guys want to do that.
Well, can we make it just a one point to your point and have it be a one little sentence succinct bullet point that just basically says anyone who's within 3 feet of a confirmed case for longer than 10 minutes will be considered a probable case.
I would be okay with that. And then the cloth mask, I think, line could stay.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's fine.
And then the line after that, the final line, I'm not sure where we stand at this point.
Right. I'd strike that from this because we haven't gotten to that quarantine portion yet, but I would strike the 10 days following last exposure because we're not there yet.
Good.
Yeah, last one.
So in other words, Paul, if we're all in agreement, the second bullet point is amended.
Anyone within 3 feet
of an infected
individual for longer than 10 minutes.
And the cloth mask bullet point remains intact.
Yep. And so we eliminate the first and third bullet point.
Where's the cloth mask?
It's the second to last one.
Bottom.
Oh, do not eliminate closed. Gotcha. Which has always been. Anyone, okay, so then the other two in there, the two, to anyone who is not fully vaccinated and anyone who is not fully vaccinated. Maybe. Are those two staying or go?
So anyone who's not fully vaccinated who is within, oh, you're talking about the third bullet point and the fourth bullet point? 3 and 4. Anyone not fully vaccinated? I think you get rid of 3 would be my take. And you could probably combine 4. That 4 is kind of picked up and said it's already in 2, which is if you are in within 3 feet of a person for more than 10 minutes. Obviously, if your mom has COVID and you're obviously going to be within 3 feet of her for more than 10 minutes, that kind of already falls into that one. I don't know if it's a little bit redundant to say at home. It's anywhere really, not just school.
So scratch number 4 also, Phil.
Sorry, can you say that again?
So number 4 says that anyone who is not fully vaccinated with household contact with an infected individual. I feel like that's a subset of what we said already in 2, which is if you're close to somebody closer than 3 feet for more than 10 minutes, that's a probable case. I think that it would go without saying, at least in my house, I'm sure everybody else's, if somebody in your house has it, you're going to have been within 3 feet for more than 10 minutes at some point in time. So I feel like that's a little bit redundant to say that as well. And so I feel like it kind of falls already into, and again, I think the less, or the little that we line out there, the better.
It's always you, Chris.
I know I'm a problem. A very big problem here. I think if I hold it, it's okay.
I agree. And Paul, let me just say, I think it's safe to say this on behalf of the board. If we edit this document tonight, and if Lisa Patrick says, I really need some coverage here or there, we need to know that, and we can amend this document to suit her needs, because nobody's looking to undercut our head nurse here. Okay, sure.
Yeah, I mean, is it worth then setting aside time for her to get a chance to see that and kind of review this to see her take on it?
My thought was, we edit this, we reach consensus, we pass it, and as soon as we hear we need to amend, we might have to come back. I'm hoping that won't be the case. I just want Lisa to know that if she has issues, we need to hear that. Okay.
All right, so are we keeping that one called close contact, or are we going to change it to probable cases? Doesn't matter. Advising staff and
I apologize to everybody. I know it's a long night. This is a lot, but I really need a break.
Okay, bathroom break. Or
bathroom
or get a
my
drink.
God, writing by committee break.
All right, I move we go to recess, to powder our noses until 8 p.m. at 7:52.
Thank you.
We can just give you dictatorial power.
There you go. Yeah. We have the magic wand.
I don't know if it's the Zoom feedback mics.
I don't know.
I think it's
wonder.
a feedback issue, because
These plug-in ones.
I think there's something happening with
She can mute all of us, but she can't unmute all of us. I don't know if you guys, okay. So that way they can hear us at home too. Perfect. All right, we will call this meeting back to order and continue our work through of this. Did we need to go back to the temperature thing? Was there something you wanted to add on temperature thing?
Yeah, I have to eat a little bit of crow here. It's been brought to my attention that if we move forward with that temperature check at the entrance of the building, we may be above and beyond what county recommendations are. And it sounds like we maybe weren't catching very many kids in that screening this last year anyhow. So
when you say not catching kids, you mean kids that wound up being sick, they didn't get picked up by having a high temperature before?
Or parents just kept them home.
Oh, gotcha.
From the get-go. So there were very few kids who actually got caught up in that screening.
I think Lisa's report was that nobody came to the door and they had a high temperature.
Which is probably why, that's what, I'm sorry, I should have spoken more plainly. That's what I was trying to get at when I said, let's talk about staffing and supporting and funding, because I think the reason why 18 didn't have that in here to begin with is because, as it turns out, it wasn't the best use of our time or staff resources. So they were saying, we don't need to do that. But if board members still feel like we should do that, fair game, but just so that we're all working with the same information.
Well, I'm okay with getting rid of it then. I mean, that's good information to hear, or good information to have when making that decision to say, hey, look, we definitely had kids that had COVID. We definitely were taking the temperatures of everybody, and that didn't catch anybody. I don't know if it's worth then the time, effort, and money that's going to be required to staff that. I can't rationalize saying that I'm for it. I'm certainly not against it. If somebody feels that that's going to make a big difference and that's a sticking point, I'm totally fine with it. But I certainly won't fight for that then.
Well, full disclosure, I visited every building every 9 weeks except for the last one, and frequently my temperature was like 89 point something. So I don't know, maybe I just run cold, but I don't know that it was the tool that we wanted it to be. And I think that's maybe why, I don't want to put words in Nurse Lisa's mouth or the administration, but I think that's maybe kind of why we know when kids are sick and we figure it out. I think maybe that's where that came from, but.
Since I brought it up in the first place, I'm fine eating some crow and asking for that to be stripped back out of there. But if we do that, I think we need to adjust that bottom line to of testing and screening to, no, sorry, not that one. Temperature and symptom screening. Because originally it said schools will conduct temperature checks when staff or students report COVID symptoms. And we changed it to upon entry or something, right? So maybe if we rolled that language back to what it said originally and disregard me bringing it up in the first place.
Okay, so just put those.
Is it
back where they were?
That's my thought, but other board members, I don't know. I see the point of screening at the door, but if we caught 0 kids last year doing that, it's a heck of a lot of dedication of resources to do that, and especially if it's above and beyond what the county's recommending anyhow. But other thoughts?
Well, and for little ones, they sometimes run a little low in the morning anyway, precisely when you're checking them.
Screening,
So
yeah.
you see their eyeballs are funny and then you have them take their temperature. Sorry.
Okay, then ready to move on? Okay, so advising staff and families of sick students and exclusion from school. The first bullet point, in accordance with state and local laws and regulations, the district will notify local health officials, staff, and families of reported cases of COVID-19 while maintaining confidentiality in accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. All right, so bullet point 2, the district will follow Lawrence Douglas County Public Health guidelines for quarantine and isolation.
This is what you were worried about earlier, Chris. Is this our factor? Is 10 days our factor? Or what?
Yeah, this is the concern because should Lawrence or Douglas County bump that up to 14 days or drop it to 5, we'd be out of compliance with their own document. So I think if we either adhere to what the recommendation is for that quarantine or set our own.
Well, we've already kind of set our own because it went back in section 6, subsection 3, bullet point 2. Yeah, we said that if you're going to have a negative test, even if you're suspected, you come back with a negative test, you come back to school, which isn't following the guidelines, because the guidelines there is like you have to be 10 days if you have a suspected case.
So maybe to that line, we could add, to that Lawrence Douglas County Public Health line, we could say, unless a negative test result is brought back. Or
I
however
think
it's
I would just get rid of the because I mean, you can't say you're following that unless we're not going to follow it, which would be that, I feel like. So I think you either, you know, you can't say we're going to follow this until we don't want to. You know, I think it's either we're going to follow it or we're not. And we've kind of already said that we're not going to follow it. So I would just strike that line off of there and say that, you know, quarantine will be dictated by PCR test results or something like that.
Okay, I'm going to push back a little bit on that. I agree what you're saying. I don't want the all or nothing language, but I do think it's important that we still consult. I mean, it doesn't mean we have to be dictated by
Necessarily if those
circumstances don't, but I also don't want to become a replacement agency for health people, because for the 10 millionth and one time, I am not a doctor. So while I'm okay with saying we won't follow, I would prefer to keep language in that we are going, because we're still trying to achieve best practices.
Right.
So is there some sort of middle ground we could coalesce around on that? Or am I just being difficult?
You could say something along the lines of that the district will take into consideration Lawrence public health guidelines, and we'll do our negative tests to you know, stop quarantine. I was really good there at the beginning and dropped off on the end. So
It captures the sentiment, though.
Do you see that as our only contradiction to this at this point?
I feel like you're quizzing me.
No, I just wonder.
I think that's I think there's gonna be more to come.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that was the first point, that I think there's something that's written in one way in one place and completely contradicted in the next place.
Which will be upsetting and confusing for everyone, no matter how they feel. So I agree with you about having clear language. I just don't want to discount public health agencies for whom have trained in those areas, and I haven't. That's all I'm saying.
All right.
Phil, read me your sentence again.
I can't read it. I can re-say it though.
Re-say it.
Okay. I said the district will take. See, it was so good the first time. You're supposed to write it down then. Okay, we'll take into consideration Lawrence Douglas County's public health guidelines. You could just take into consideration. You could just leave it at that. Just take into consideration their public health guidelines, and you don't have to say what we're doing, because we've already said what we're going to plan on doing.
For quarantine, coupled with the above referenced procedures for negative test results, or then that references what we said aforementioned. So that might be too wordy.
I think you just leave it blank, because we've already kind of said succinctly that what our plan is if you're, so I would just say that we will always keep in, you know, we always consider their guidelines.
Okay. Thank you for compromising on that.
Easy to do. All right, so the next, are we good there then? Separation while in school care rooms. First bullet point, each school will have a room or space separate from the clinic where students or staff who may have COVID-19 or another communicable disease will wait for evaluation or pickup. Basically, we've got our own little private quarantine room while they're waiting for somebody to come get them.
Okay, that was done this last year.
Schools will inform parents to pick up their child immediately if the child becomes ill at school. Families should keep emergency contact numbers updated in Power School by notifying the school office. That's probably pretty standard. Okay, so next section, household exposure for students and staff. Quarantine affects direct contacts who are not fully vaccinated, not secondary contacts. So I would change it, just as Andy said I was going to have to do a whole bunch of times through here. I would say just quarantine affects direct contacts, not secondary contacts.
Not secondary,
yeah.
There's also a reference within their example, sorry.
Yeah. So example, if there's a positive case named Leo, Leo's unvaccinated family members, so I just get rid of that and say family members, will be in quarantine until a negative test result is produced. Leo's classmates will be in quarantine until a negative test result is produced. Leo's classmates' families will not be in quarantine. Any close contacts who are vaccinated will not be in quarantine. I just get rid of the last one. Yeah. I don't know. Is the example, is that kind of like wordy and convoluted? I mean, what we've done is we've got a definition and then just define the definition again, kind of, sort of.
Is the example viable is the question, I think.
I mean, that seems like a whole lot of words to just say, you know, your primary contacts are going to be quarantined until negative test results are produced.
Yeah, I don't think it hurts to have it in there, but especially if we're removing the unvaccinated terms from there in that last sentence, if we're striking that out, I think it still makes sense to provide an example.
So we are deleting the last part or last sentence, Paul.
Right. All right, so moving on, school response to students, staff in isolation or quarantine. The district will follow Lawrence Douglas County Public Health guidelines for quarantine exclusion due to COVID-19. So I would just say that the district will follow its plan in place for quarantine. Staff will provide remote or hybrid instruction from the.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
Don't forget that. Say that again. The district.
Girl that sits in, or the guy, the person in the typewriter room that has the little keyboard that's like you push 3 buttons on it.
Yeah.
Stenographer. Yeah.
You need one of those things.
Them.
Not
Read
yet.
that first one again, how you want.
Okay, I just said the district will follow its aforementioned guidelines for quarantine and exclusion due to COVID-19.
Kelly, is your concern rearing its head here?
If it is, you can say with consideration given to Lawrence Public Health and Douglas
Yes,
County Public
I would
Health.
like to keep that consistent, if everyone else is okay with it.
Yeah.
For sure, I think that's definitely the key point.
Right.
I'm good with that.
And I would change, Paul, I would change the heading here to student support or something similar,
Mhm. That's the email I was looking
and
for.
then keep bullet point 2.
Okay. So the first one is, I can strike like
Susan said, I think you can strike the first one because that's just three little sections ago we said that exact same thing.
I have a question on number 1 there then. Are there circumstances in which the county contacts us about a contact, like a student, not in our building, but they contact us and say, one of your students has been or potentially been exposed, you need to trace that down. So this may be the reversal of that communication chain, if that makes sense. Like we're complying with their.
that happens quite often.
Because of work,
Either
students
the-
can work in
Right.
other.
County
Mhm.
or usually the county contacting Lisa and saying so-and-so tested positive.
Mhm.
I mean, that falls right squarely into our previous bullet point of suspected or confirmed cases, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be.
So based on the
suspected school,
information
yeah,
we're pulling in.
based
Okay.
on what they're giving, but now that falls directly into that suspected case and they have to
Okay.
get a.
As long as we're
Yeah.
Cooperating with those situations that come up outside of the school, because that was the vast majority of our COVID cases were occurring outside of school bounds anyway.
Mhm.
So make sure that we're still going to be compliant with those.
So you don't feel we're losing coverage there?
I mean, I think if we got that phrased as it was in that, what was that section called?
So if that's the case, Paul, this whole section, the title changes to student support.
Student support for
I don't think you need more than that.
the student support. All right.
And then the second bullet point is impact, unless Kelly, you think it needs more reinforcements in that.
No, I would only say staff will provide remote or hybrid instruction from the classroom and online resources when necessary. I think we can also add that, all of the staff trained in areas of mental health will continue to be accessible to students studying, being, at home. That's saying it better than what I just said.
So it's not just the instruction, it's the support.
It's not just the instruction,
Yeah.
it's the other, that's what I'm trying to say, that it is said in a way that it's not just instruction that they're continuing to get at home, but it's also the other support, which, by the way, I mean.
So do you want to say staff will provide remote and hybrid support from the classroom and online resources when necessary?
No, I think that's all good, the way it is, but then like
Okay.
another bullet point that just says, in addition to providing instruction, students will have access to all the same mental health resource or whatever other support. It doesn't have to be mental health specifically, but
You could say something along the lines of there will be, significant effort made to minimize interruption to the learning and social and emotional support from school in the event of quarantine.
yes, that's much better. Yeah. And what I was going to say is like, we're outlining this, but I just want to note, it's not like that. I mean, I know that people feel like that didn't happen, but I also know that our staff worked really, really hard every single day to make that happen. But by having it in these protocols, I think, even if it doesn't change some of the things that happen day to day, it also from a board standpoint, it provides what things are important to us. And even if it seems redundant to those of us who've been living it, I think it's important to communicate it.
Okay, so next one, returning to school after isolation quarantine. The district will follow protocols as outlined previously for the return to school with consideration given to the LDCPH. And the next section has no subsections, so we can probably eliminate maintaining healthy environments and operations, unless there's somebody who wants to add something under that topic.
I think it's like a
It's a
chapter heading
Okay.
kind of,
Yeah.
whether it needs a double
Yeah.
bold or I don't
Yeah,
know.
we should
Yeah,
make that all,
underlined.
oh, it is already all caps. No, it's not.
No.
Make it all caps. Okay, so next section, maintaining healthy environments and operations. Social distancing considerations. Schools will observe 3 feet or as much as social distancing as possible, given the physical environment. Provide visual cues about safety measures in classrooms and hallways. Provide directional signs in buildings as necessary. Remove extra furniture and unnecessary materials from classrooms to increase available space. On that one, I'd say if necessary. But, if they don't need to create extra additional space, I'd sure like them to have their globe in there or whatever.
I like that.
I'm a flat earther.
I knew it.
Okay, so good there. Cleaning and disinfecting. Custodial teams will follow the district's established cleaning procedures in maintaining healthy and clean environments and prioritize high-touch areas, including handles, handrails, counters, and surfaces, tables, chairs, and desks, etc. Custodial teams will clean restrooms regularly throughout the school day. The district will train all staff in effective cleaning and disinfecting procedures. Staff will provide hand sanitizer stations in multiple locations throughout the building for frequent use. Custodial teams will provide cleaner, disinfectant, and cleaning cloths for classrooms upon staff request or sign up. Building administrators will encourage non-custodial staff to clean and disinfect their classrooms and work areas. Building administrators will notify the custodial staff of COVID-19 cases so they may close affected areas for cleaning, disinfecting, and sanitizing. All good there. All right, communal spaces. Observe 3 feet or as much social distancing as possible given the physical environment. Office areas will include signage informing staff, students, and visitors to wear a mask. Observe 3 feet or as much social distancing as possible given the physical environment, and no lunch guests. So I left off of there that not fully vaccinated part. Gotcha. Unless somebody wants it on there. I think it was kind of settled. Okay, physical guides. Schools will provide physical guides such as decals on floors and sidewalks and signs on walls to remind staff, students, and visitors of social distancing. Playground recess. Staff and students should wash or sanitize hands before and after recess. Students may use playground equipment.
I need to back this up real quick. On the communal spaces one, does that include athletic facilities?
You mean
Like the gym.
like practice or like watching a basketball game?
Like watching a basketball game? I don't know that I see it specified elsewhere.
I'm trying to remember. I don't feel like we had any.
It's not necessarily,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily in here. Like Gary did give me a few suggestions, but it was late, so I didn't get a chance to put it in the document. For some activity things. But Gary also felt like it's kind of covered elsewhere in the document, so the things he added wouldn't necessarily, he said wouldn't have to be in there. But he gave me a little section, about 3 or 4, to kind of address what you're asking, Chris.
Okay.
4 activities in particular.
Okay.
If you would like those added, I don't have them in front of me, but
No, I just wanted to be careful about that. Office areas will include signage informing staff, students, and visitors who are not fully well, we struck that part. But then we say wear a mask.
We could say, Matt, you could have it say instead of wearing masks, you could say masks are recommended.
So we can add the recommended language.
Instead of having it be, because again, we've already kind of said that we're not going to mandate masks.
Right, that's what I was
Say
wanting to catch. We didn't do
masks
that.
are, you could, instead of the sign saying wear a mask.
Right.
Masks are recommended.
Right.
And I think that if you wanted to put, I think you could make it pretty easy and just put in this little bullet point, given, communal spaces and to include athletic events or the gym, again, it's because it observe 3 feet or as much social distancing as possible. So it leaves it a little bit open. So you could still put it into this section instead of having a whole new section and making it 8.5 pages. You could just.
I think if we throw that word recommend into that section, I think I'm trying to think of the different athletic environments like the gyms, and whether we can just say recommended to wear a mask and observe recommended to wear a mask and recommended to observe 3 feet social distance. I think that covers us okay for all those environments, but I'm maybe not thinking of some environments there.
Well, I get what you're saying, because we don't want to have it be one thing in one place and not in the other.
Right. Just have some uniform. And I feel like it's a relatively easy thing to say, like we got to sign up on the door to go into the gym, for instance, saying, hey, you're encouraged to wear a mask and observe 3 feet social distance, but we're not going to, kick you out of here if you don't follow those things. But
yeah, I think that falls pretty squarely under communal spaces.
Yeah.
To not having to avoid it or not having to add another section.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Oh, Gary, thanks, but no thanks. He's not here, is he? Oh, no.
Okay, sorry, we can go on after that. If
No,
that's okay with everybody.
Yeah. Okay, physical guides. Schools will provide physical guides such as decals. We read that one already. Okay, playground recess we read. Food service. Meals will be provided to all students free of charge. Food service will clean and sanitize all carts, utensils, and food surfaces after each use. Schools will follow National School Breakfast and Lunch Program meal requirements. No guests may join students for meals.
We already mentioned that previous. Or that
Yeah,
last
the no
bullet point.
meals. Yes. Yeah.
So we can strike it here, or do you want to strike it from before under communal spaces?
Let's strike it here because we're here. I don't want to look back.
Okay, I like that.
Okay, food service and management of food allergies. Elementary building administrators in cooperation with food services will determine the location of logistics for meal consumption and share that information with parents. Secondary students will eat in cafeterias or other designated dining areas. The following guidelines will be implemented for eating. A staff member will provide supervision in the designated location where meals and snacks are served and eaten. Students will have the opportunity strike 2 for hand washing before and after meals and snacks are eaten. Yeah. Okay. Staff will
And
clean.
there's a missing word there. And after snacks are eaten, or
Yeah, before.
Period.
I-
After
I-
snacks. You don't need to have RE.
After meals and snacks.
There
Yeah,
you
very
go.
good.
Thank you.
'Cause what if they're playing with them?
Building a tower.
In the first bullet point, or am I in the wrong?
We're in the second bullet point.
Students will
in
have
the
the
third bullet
opportunity.
point. Yeah. Third bullet point, subset 2.
Just cut it
Students
after.
will have the opportunity for hand washing strike 2 before and after meals and snacks, period.
Okay. Staff will clean and sanitize surfaces before and after meals and snacks, period.
Period. Yeah.
Students may not trade or share food. Self-serve protocols will be in place. Classroom layouts. Elementary classes will cohort. Staff will maintain seating charts for use in contact tracing. When the physical environment permits, student will sit facing the same direction. Staff will utilize outdoor spaces for instructional purposes when possible. Plexiglass dividers are available for staff use. No soft furniture in classrooms. Is that just for cleaning? Like you don't want to have to clean soft stuff, or what's the point of?
But it also takes up room in the classroom, so we can make sure we can separate kids.
Okay.
So last year I think we did a cohort with the sixth graders, right? At the junior high.
With sixth graders.
Yeah. So we would not be doing that this year, correct?
I don't think that's the point.
Okay. Okay. So I want to make sure of that.
Okay, sharing facilities. The district will accept community facility use requests beginning August 1st, 2021. Okay, visitors. The district limits visitors indoors at facilities during the school day. Visitors will follow sign-in procedures. Visitors, and I'd strike out who are not fully vaccinated, but visitors will observe 3 feet or as much social distancing as possible given the physical environment. This is to go back to your point earlier, Chris, where you said, do we just recommend it or say that you know, are we gonna now say, oh, you got 2.5 feet?
Get out of here.
Okay, yeah. So it will be recommended that visitors observe 3 feet or as much social distancing as possible given the physical environment.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like the recommendation part.
No visitors allowed during meal times.
Man.
Staff may conduct virtual parent-teacher conferences from the classroom at the request of a parent guardian. How about at the request of the teacher? Do they have that power to say, I mean, do they have that authority to say, you know, look, maybe as a teacher, I don't want to be in close contact with somebody. Can the teacher then say, I want to do it remote?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a cooperative thing between the parents and the teachers, so.
So then should that read staff, or should it read something like parent-teacher conferences can happen in a remote format based on the desire or request of the parent or teacher?
I didn't read this as being a parent-teacher conference. I read this.
That's correct, Susan.
Oh,
It's not the
okay.
actual.
You should have told me before I got all into it.
The normal parent calls and says, I've got a concern. The
Okay.
teacher and the parent can have a Zoom meeting
I
if
got
they
you.
want to
Okay.
discuss an issue.
I misunderstood.
This
that.
is not necessarily, but I do think, depending on how things are, we may consider virtual parent-teacher conferences again, depending on how things are going.
Okay, but not for here, this part. Okay. Attendance. The district will follow its attendance policy for staff and students. Families should contact their child's school to report student absences. Staff should report absences on Frontline or their time clock. Transportation. Buses will be regularly cleaned, disinfected, and sanitized. Maintain a seating chart for passengers. Open windows and vents when possible. Field trips and gatherings. Staff will incorporate district mitigation strategies into the planning of field trips and gatherings for the safety of students, staff, and families. No capacity limitations for gatherings. Water systems. Water fountains will not be available. Staff and students should bring their own water bottles and label them. Water bottle filters are available. And are those the deals on the drinking fountains that they can put their water bottle underneath to fill? So the drinking fountain can be off, but that can be still on.
Correct. That's as I understand it, talking to the principals, we could do that.
Ventilation. Ionizers will remain off until further notice. Higher grade filters will be used to better filter air. The district will continue to monitor air quality.
Do we want to add something about, well, let me back up a little bit. I know that the ionizers are involved in a lawsuit, but we also don't know how effective they were last year. Like, they could have been extremely effective, and we now had to turn them off because of the lawsuit while it works its way through. And again, we're not involved directly in that lawsuit. That's just a out of abundance of caution there. But is there some other way that's not listed out here that we could encourage or increase airflow in the building? I mean, like mentioning things like having, I think earlier we mentioned having classes outdoors or opening windows or something like that. I guess I'm really concerned about the ventilation issue, since we don't have that ionizer that I think was really effective, but I don't have.
Chris, this may be off topic now for what we're discussing, but you bring up the point that we were told ionizers would allow us to use lesser filters because it increased. So I wonder how much we need to now look at. If we're not going to use ionizers this year, do we need to readdress that whole issue? Upgrade the filters, that there's probably money we can use for that. Upgrade motors if the filters start to slow air. There's a whole range of topics there. Okay.
Chuck that started on that.
Yeah.
And looking at the higher grade filters. The only issue with that is it's kind of, you can do that, and of course the filter lasts so long, and then you could make a change. But the concern, as it was last time, is that the higher grade filters will make your unit work harder. The fans will work harder to do that. That doesn't mean don't do it. It just means if you continue to do that year after year, probably shorten the length of time of your unit.
And I think this wording here is probably okay for our purposes. I just think the board needs to be presented with data like, what does that look like? What's that trade-off of upgrading the filters versus how hard it is on equipment, how much it slows the airflow, et cetera. Again, I apologize, we got plenty to talk about.
No, it's a good point.
Okay, instructional materials, shared objects, limit the sharing of supplies whenever possible. COVID-19 points of contact and response teams. The school nurse health aide will serve as a point of contact for COVID-19. Each building will maintain a COVID-19 response team. I'm assuming that's the same, that's just carried over from last year. Did we have that already in place, right?
Yes, for the most part. I would say in some buildings, the response team is very small, but they each and every one of them have.
Okay, student health services changes in asthma management. So nebulizers. Okay, Baldwin City Public Schools will not allow students to receive nebulizer treatments while at school. Nebulizers are small air compressor machines that individuals with asthma breathe into and out of to administer a liquid form of albuterol. Exhalations through nebulizers used by someone with COVID-19 can spray the virus into the air. Families should consult with their physician about alternative treatments, such as metered dose inhalers with spacers for their child's school asthma plan. That was in place for this last year as well, or not?
Yes,
Okay.
I believe that this is coming directly from this
right
thing that should be in there.
Right.
So,
okay, that's what leads me to believe that's pretty specific wording. So assuming that was in place for last year, and I'm maybe not people. That's not the little breather deals like this. That's actually
No,
big.
it's not the inhaler.
Yeah,
it's
the end.
All right. Good job, guys. Okay, so we've gone all the way through that. So let's come back to where we started with it. Do we want to approve? What do you guys want to do? Are you comfortable with approving a motion pending these changes? Do you want to vote on that? Would you prefer for these changes to happen and then be sent to us so that you can digest and, because we process differently, and I'm okay with whatever you guys want to do. Let's hear preferences.
I have no problem waiting to read the final deal, and that always makes me feel more comfortable rather than, and I don't, does it doing much good for us to say that we're going to vote on it to be pending, because we'll then still have to look at it, right? I mean, so I think I don't think anybody should ever vote for something that they haven't looked at or read. So I mean, I personally think
I would only suggest that because we went through it word by word.
yeah, that's true.
So I wouldn't say that in general, but Susan, do you have something?
I just think it's really important that, nurse Patrick and administration keep that up and make sure that it meets their approval.
I think we do that, show it to them, come back tomorrow and do it word by word again, and probably for the rest of the week.
Just every evening, just meet right here, 6 o'clock. You know how to party, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, and since we did go through it, I don't mind if we put that off for a few days. To Paul's point, I mean, we feel like the people that are here got a chance to listen to us work through that word by word. I feel like pretty comfortable that what we're going to sign is pretty much exactly what we just went through. So I don't know how much of a hurry there is. I do think we should have it signed in the near future, but I'm comfortable if that's not till, Wednesday or something.
There's a key person involved that needs to review this that is taking some vacation time. But I expect back later in the week.
Okay,
I'm comfortable with that.
all right, Andy?
Yeah, so the process now would be, Paul, you will type that up. And then we won't see it until Lisa has a chance to review? Or you want to show us what you?
No, I think Lisa will review it. She's got to get concerned with something. And most certainly, the next meeting you have to review is probably here to talk about. And so if she's good, fine, we'll move on. But if she's got a real concern with something, then she should be at that next meeting to kind of tell you why.
So Kelly, for your purposes, maybe the scheduling of that next meeting depends on Lisa's availability. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you for everyone who's worked on this. Great job. All right, so that wraps that up. At this time, I move we enter into executive session with Mr. Dorothy to discuss negotiations pursuant to the non-elected personnel exception under COMA. And it's 8:37 currently. How much time would we like on that?
This many?
Okay, 8:47 is when the open meeting will resume at the PAC. Is there a second?
Second.
Phil is seconded. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 6-0.
We're in the little room?
Yeah.
Oh, is it locked? Oh, you have a key. Okay.
All right, we'll call this meeting back to order. At this time, I move we enter into executive session with Mr. Dorothy pursuant to discussing personnel with the justification for non-elected personnel exception under coma. And the open meeting will resume back in the PAC at 8:54. Phil seconded, sorry. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0.
we approve the.
Okay.
The personnel report.
Second.
Susan has moved and Phil has seconded that we approve the personnel report as presented. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Second.
Sorry. Andy has moved and Phil has seconded that we approve the negotiation agreement as presented. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. All we have left to do is adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Phil moved and Tony seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Motion carries, meeting adjourned, 8:55.